Hi, everybody. Welcome to week 4 of History of Rock and Roll. And today I'd like to talk with you a little bit about The Day the Music Died, that song we were listening to last week that was written by Don McLean in 1971. We were talking last time about how that song really shows you a lot about what had been in place in rock and roll and what came to be in place in rock and roll from the 50s to the 60s. But even more than that, how it shows that America was undergoing a change of consciousness from the 50s to the 60s. So, what I'd like you to do for this week's discussion is to find something in that song that is interesting to you, research it a little bit, and then put your research findings in your discussion comment and also pose a question to everybody in the group that will spark some further discussion. So I'm going to show you how I did that with a particular topic that interests me. I'm going to talk today about the Altamont incident with the Rolling Stones that's touched upon in the song The Day the Music Died. Well, when I listened to the lyrics of The Day the Music Died, there are several different topics that pop up in addition to the Altamont incident. He talks about the actual plane crash in 1959. He talks about what rock was like in the 50s, what life was like in the 50s too, especially for young people. He talks about the iconic artists of the 50s being superseded by the artists of the 60s. And he also talks about political figures of the 60s. There are many other things that are touched on in this song. Maybe you'll find something that's interesting to you that wasn't as interesting to me, but go ahead and just research anything that looks interesting or appealing to you that is mentioned in the song. Now, in the song The Day the Music Died, the Rolling Stones are mentioned, and you can tell right away that they're talking about the Rolling Stones because they reference a particular song. So here's the section of the lyrics that references the Rolling Stones. Oh, and there we were, all in one place, a generation lost in space, with no time left to start again. So come on, Jack be nimble, Jack be quick. Jack Flash sat on a candlestick, 'cause fire's the devil's only friend. Oh, and as I watched him on the stage, my hands were clenched in fists of rage. No angel born in hell could break that Satan spell. And as the flames climbed high into the night to light the sacrificial rite, I saw Satan laughing with delight the day the music died. So here's a little background on the Rolling Stones. First of all, the group formed in 1962. It was two schoolmates, Keith Richards on guitar and Mick Jagger, the lead singer, who became the focal points of that group, even though they were not the founder exactly. But they were the two that were always with the group and still are with the group to this day. Now, the Beatles were just a little ahead of the Rolling Stones. The Beatles formed in 1960, and from the very beginning, the Beatles were writing many more original songs than were the Stones. The Stones eventually did begin writing original songs, and the song that first brought them to the public's attention was the song Satisfaction. Here we have Satisfaction from 1965. I'll just give you a little taste of that. I will just pause right there, but I just wanted to draw your attention to the fact that this clip shows the original band members and this fella here in the white, the guitarist. Brian Jones is his name, was actually the founder of the group that became the Rolling Stones. And yet, even though he was a brilliant guy, he also had a drug problem. So he did not last with the group, and we'll talk more about the group and their early years and that incident as we move forward in class. But this is Satisfaction from 1965 that brought the Rolling Stones to the public's attention. Well, the Beatles were immediately successful in the US. They came to the US in 1964 with the song I Want to Hold Your Hand and caught on immediately. But the Rolling Stones had a difficult time catching on in the US. There were many years after they started out in 1962 where they toured the US to empty seats before they caught on. But by 1969, when they did the Altamont concert, they were definitely a thing. In 1968, they recorded Jumpin' Jack Flash, and that was a song that drew on their blues heritage. They really loved the blues, especially Richards and Jagger kind of met because they liked some of the same blues artists. So let me show you a sample of Jumpin' Jack Flash. Here's a version of Jumpin' Jack Flash, which was recorded in 1969, the very same year of the Altamont concert. By the way, this song is just about coming through a hard time and making it through. So in the lyrics of The Day the Music Died, when McLean says, "So Jack be nimble, Jack be quick," he's talking about the Rolling Stones right there. It sounds like he's quoting a nursery rhyme, right? But he's really referring to Jumpin' Jack Flash, that song that was recorded in 1968. Online, I have described the terrible incident that happened at Altamont in your discussion question for this week. I will outline it briefly here. Basically, this was a free concert that the Rolling Stones scheduled in Northern California that was modeled after Woodstock, which had happened earlier that year. In August of 1968, a concert had been put on on a farm in Woodstock, upstate New York, that was attended by hundreds of thousands of youths. And remarkably, even though it was a 3-day concert event featuring many different primary artists of the day, it was a very peaceful happening. When the Rolling Stones organized their concert in Altamont for December of 1969, they were concerned about security, and so their concert people, talked with Hell's Angels. I don't know if you know anything about the Hells Angels, but they are a biker group that has a reputation for being particularly violent. So they spoke with the Hells Angels and said, "Hey, could you provide security for the concert?" The Hells Angels said, "We're not the police. We don't want to be the police. We just want to attend the concert and enjoy the music." And the concert promoter said, "Hey, but, could you give people directions and kind of keep people off the stage?" And the Hells Angels said, "Yes, we could do that." And the concert promoter said, "Well, okay, well then, tell you what, we'll give you all the beer that you want." So basically, they were hired as a kind of security force for the concert and paid in beer. Now, what happened was the Rolling Stones were singing a song, "Sympathy for the Devil," that paints a kind of favorable picture of the devil. The point of the song really, though, is to say, you know what? There's evil in all of us, and there's potential in all of us to do wrong things. So during that concert, during that performance of "Sympathy for the Devil," an altercation occurred between Meredith Hunter, a young black man who was there with his girlfriend, who was white, coincidentally, and who had come to the concert dressed in a beautiful green suit and also with a revolver, a 22 revolver on his person. So there was a bit of a skirmish, and after that, Meredith Hunter went off on his own and fumed for a while, and some people said that he was talking about killing Mick Jagger. Well, there was a further skirmish with Meredith Hunter while the Rolling Stones continued to perform Under My Thumb. And so during that song, Meredith Hunter was hit in the head by one of the Hells Angels and then chased into another part of the crowd, and 6 of the angels began beating him up, and one of the angels, Alan Passaro, stabbed him. Now, I will just play a little bit of this footage. You have more of it available, the entire link in the discussion question, but this is where the first part of the altercation happens as they're singing Sympathy for the Devil. And you can hear Mick Jagger coming in over the instrumentals and saying, "Everybody cool down, singing that over the instrumentals. This is Meredith Hunter in the crowd, and perhaps you could see just a flash of him kind of being carted off by Hell's Angels. And so the second part of that altercation is while they were singing Under My Thumb. You know, after this song concluded, the Rolling Stones said, "Hey, there's fighting going on out. Just stop it. We need all to be chill with one another," and requesting help. But in order to keep control over the crowd, the Rolling Stones felt that they should continue playing. Otherwise, it could just descend into total mayhem. So that's what they did as they performed Under My Thumb. Let me show you just a short clip of that footage. So what a terrible tragedy that this young man could have lost his life during a concert. It was not something that the Rolling Stones anticipated or hoped for. They didn't play that song. They didn't play Sympathy for the Devil for many years after that incident happened. Meredith Hunter was taken to a tent where they awaited an ambulance, and during that time where he was waiting for the ambulance to arrive, he died. The aftermath of the incident was that Alan Passaro was tried for murder. He was the Hell's Angel who stabbed Hunter. He was acquitted because it was found that Hunter had brandished his revolver during the altercation, so it was ruled self-defense. Later, the Rolling Stones settled with Hunter's family, giving them $10,000. Ironically, 16 years after that incident, Alan Passaro was found drowned in a river in Northern California with $10,000 in his pocket. So, a terrible tragedy. What I would like to know from you is, do you think that the Stones should have been held more accountable for that incident than they were? Ladies and gentlemen, this is what I'd like you to do next. Find something that interests you in The Day the Music Died, research that topic, and present your research in your discussion response. I also want you to pose a question to the group as a result of your research findings that will spark some discussion. Good luck with that.